Hi, welcome everybody to our Learn the Signs Act Early Cultural Moment. I am Janelle Preston. I am the Act Early Ambassador to the state of Utah, and I'm really excited today to be talking to JC Vasquez. I said it right,
Pretty
correct?
close.
Pretty close.
Vasquez. The U is silent.
Ah, I'm the worst with names. So JC is going to be talking to us a little bit today. I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Perfect. Jenna, thank you so much. It is a pleasure to have this opportunity to communicate and to have a conversation about cultural competency and providing services within the Latino community. I have been at Utah State for 20 years now, and I've been privileged to be working in many different projects within the Center for Persons with Disabilities, in many different areas. But one of my area of expertise is in multicultural education and cultural and linguistic competence. I have developed curriculum, I have done presentations, conferences, workshops, and currently I am a faculty member in the College of Education as well. And that's my area, teaching future students the value of diversity, equity, and cultural competence in the area of education.
Yeah, and I know you've brought a lot of wealth of information to the Institute, formerly the CPD, and
Indeed, I should become familiar.
it's hard, isn't it?
It is.
For those that are wondering, we were the Center for Persons with Disabilities, but we've now changed our name to the Institute for Disability Research, Policy, and Practice. So us old people tend to revert back to the CPD because IDRPP does not roll off our tongues as easily with that. So, but JC, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us. My first question that I have is, so what is and why is cultural awareness important for early intervention providers?
Thank you. Yes, this is something that I've been very fortunate to be involved in many different projects at the Institute in different communities. And one of the approaches that I learned and that later on disseminated into informational interventions with service providers was precisely about cultural awareness and getting to know families. So one of the things that I learned, I had the opportunity to gather with people across the state in focus groups. Because sometimes one of the things that I learned is that my assumptions, even being a member of the community, sometimes are different than many communities, because within the Latin American community, this is the beauty of this, because we have people that are from Mexico, from Central America, the Caribbean, from South America. And because of that, there's language variations, sometimes, once again, vocabulary that is common in one country in another country might be a little bit different. I learned that early in my career, that there's no standard Spanish. So that's why it's important to be able to communicate effectively with people in that area. As I was finding out elements that I could share with service providers that don't speak precisely the language, Spanish in this case, but there's some cultural practices that go beyond the language. And the one that I want to refer to is about effective relationships with people. I think this could be something that goes across everyone, regardless of culture, regardless of race and ethnicity, but specifically within the Latino community, one principle that is important is relationships. And many times in other cultures, it's just hello, hi, you have not much proximity. Within the Latin American community, proximity is near shaking hands, is a practice that is welcome and sometimes even a must in order to develop that relationships. Another component within developing effective relationships is being able to have an introduction in a period of time that before delivering services and before talking about interventions or any other subjects that need to be presented in a session, taking the time to ask questions to families. And I would include myself there, so I will use the we instead of the them. But we do value the ability to say, you know what, talk to me a little bit about the weather, talk to me a little bit about anything that you find that is relevant before we jump into a formal session. And with that, let me provide you a brief example of what am I referring to. When I was working at the Institute, we had the opportunity to collaborate with colleagues from around the country. And I was assigned among the different states that I was assigned to work with. I was assigned to work with Puerto Rico, where the majority of people prefer speaking Spanish, even though many of them are bilingual. But we had two colleagues from another state that were providing technical assistance once again in the area of disability. And so they were having some challenges. We talked about it in once again, one of our meetings that we had, and they suggested that perhaps I would get involved and participate with them. So I did. I was assigned to work with that state. And so we went to visit, and then we have service providers, we have parents, we have a group of people in this particular meeting. And the first time I was just an observer. And then I just was making notes and just observing the practices. And one of the things that I noticed is in the frustration of these two service providers that were assigned to Puerto Rico was that it was too casual. People were coming to the table with a drink or a muffin, a little bit of a breakfast. And these two service providers that I work with were just a little, well, we're here to do business, and it seems that there's just not formality. We get just a little frustrated. And when we had our debrief session after that meeting, I said, this is a cultural practice. People here value conversation. People here value just communicating and even sharing a little meal. I mean, it wasn't anything big, but a yogurt and a drink and a muffin and orange juice, something to that effect. And I said, let me suggest that in our follow-up meeting tomorrow, we bring our own orange juice and a muffin. And then we get to the meeting, we chat a little bit, we ask questions, we partake of a little snack, and then we go about presenting our business and see how it goes. And they did. So we got to this meeting, they brought just a little something for breakfast, a yogurt, and even one of the service providers was like, it is so good to see you eating with us. And oh yeah. And so we spend minutes doing that form of report. And then after 10, 15 minutes, so we pull the agenda. Okay, so should we begin our meeting? Yeah, absolutely. Things were completely different. So after we went about our meeting, and then again, we had, after getting together our debrief, they were, wow, we didn't know that would make such a difference and an impact in the way that we have been doing business. And it was really a simple thing. But this is one of those, as you mentioned in your question, cultural awareness of what works and how people like to conduct themselves receiving services. And so that's one of the recommendations that I could provide, being able to develop that rapport that is so important within Latin American culture before conducting business. And that's a way of engaging in a sincere and meaningful relationship before engaging in any type of service.
So that's a really interesting point, and I was trying to think about how we might do that as early child care providers. So many times in early intervention, we are actually going into the family's home
Mhm.
to do either our evaluations or our services. So how would you suggest that what could we as early childhood providers do to build that personal connection when we go to their homes?
The word that comes to mind is observation, and that is to observe the setting. Uh, are there pictures of family members? Are there any items that would um, allow just a little bit of something to engage in a conversation? If you see um, soccer ball, which most likely you will see in many of Latin American homes, to ask those questions. Ask questions about the family members. Ask questions, and once again, in a sensitive, respectful manner. But if there's evidence around the house of objects, decoration, outside, bicycles, uh, I don't know, toys, uh, those are great indicators that we can see without asking questions. But then I follow up a little bit more about respectfully asking. Um, Tell us a little bit about your family. Tell us a little bit about work. Tell us a little bit about anything without, once again, being too intrusive. But but little things that can spark a meaningful conversation. And once again, it doesn't have to be a deep conversation about family dynamics, but perhaps preferences, affinities uh, that we can find at the beginning. That is something that I could recommend.
Okay. That's a great thing. The other one I was wondering is that sometimes we also have them come up to our centers, whether it's for an evaluation or once again for classes or just kind of different things. So, what could we do as early child care providers to make the families, our programs, our centers actually feel more welcoming to families?
Um, I think specific directions, I think that's key to know exactly where they need to be. Parking, it's always one of those. Many years ago, I witnessed a negative experience that I think will illustrate this point. And I don't want to dwell on the negative, but illustrates the question that you referred to. There was a family that came to the center to receive services, and it was um, a mom, a daughter that it was probably about 16, 17, I want to say, and a child. And they were just wandering around in the old building where we used to be. It was a very small setting, if you recall, kind of like a maze trying to find offices. And I couldn't help but notice that. And then immediately I talked to the family, and I noticed that they spoke Spanish. And so I went about talking Spanish, and they were looking for an office. And the service provider, I will be very confidential, that person is no longer in our center, uh, made an assumption because she was late to the appointment. And then I volunteered to interpret for her, even though her 16-year-old spoke English, but I thought, I don't think it would be good for her to be placed in this situation. So I said, if I may, I would like to help you. And so the service provider was like, well, you know what? You are 15 minutes late. So you just kind of have to reschedule your appointment. And she said, I come from so far. Could she just see me today, see my little one today? Uh, and then I was a back and forth. And this service provider was a very direct to say, as a courtesy, she could have called me to let me know that she was going to be late. So I am here doing this interpretation. And then she said, well, I don't have a cell phone. And because of that, I couldn't call. And it was very difficult for me to find parking. And so I was explaining that to her as well. But this person seemed to be just more fixated into the fact that she was late. I think that's an example of a cultural difference between someone that, once again, is just getting to know our center. Parking, being at a university, it's always a challenge, and sometimes even the assumptions that everyone has a cell phone, correct? And so
Mm-hmm.
I felt bad, and I said, listen, and then I had to stop being the interpreter and being just the person, and to say, if I may interfere, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I think she has a valid concern because she's not familiar with the area, and because of that, that's the reason why she was late. Is there a way that we can work it out that you can still see her daughter, and for her, because she comes from so far in order to be here. And so the point that I'm trying to make is, as your question, how could we be more welcoming and understanding, providing effective information as to where they need to park, and being open to not make assumptions sometimes, and to sometimes time could be an issue within the Latin American community. And so sometimes they'll just cut it right to the 3 o'clock appointment, 3:01, 3:03, 3:05. Just being flexible with that approach. And I understand that for us, we have different appointments and we have to see different people, but having a little bit of more understanding in that particular practice.
Yeah, I used to have a colleague when that one time, and she would always say, "Oh, we are just whenever. We just come whenever." And I know that sometimes, because there are sometimes some of those tight schedules that, but that point of being just making sure that we've provided accurate information, and to, once again, just treat people with kindness. That's, as you were talking about, I just thought, oh, how many times have I gone to somewhere where I don't know where to park and I don't know how to get to that building? And our old CPD, for sure, half of us didn't even know where, oh, let's walk around, because it wasn't numbered correctly. So it was hard for all of us. So
Correct.
yeah, that's a great point to make with that. Are there other things that we as early childcare providers could do to help build, like you said, those effective relationships with our Latinx Hispanic population that we serve?
I think asking questions, I think sometimes we are afraid. It is difficult to make a general statement that all members of the Latinx community or Latino, we're going to be using that interchangeably, correct?
Right.
Hispanics, but asking questions, the majority of people feel comfortable, and that's how you develop rapport among our community. Meaningful questions, because sometimes I think one of the biggest mistakes that I have seen service providers make is making assumptions, as in this case that I described, that everyone has a cell phone. Well, that goes across the Latin American community. Many other people, they just don't have access to it, and we cannot assume that that's the case. And so another answering your question is just asking questions. And one of the things that I observe, and based on different focus groups that we had, people responded saying, we're comfortable when people ask us questions. Tell us, what do you expect from us? How do I refer to you? What's the best way for me to communicate? Am I speaking too fast? Because in some instances, some parents are English language learners, and they're at different stages of language acquisition. And so being able to say, am I speaking a little too fast for you? Never being condescending and being slow in your speech, because that just brings a different feeling. But asking the question, are you comfortable with the way that I'm communicating? Am I going too fast? And they will tell you. They will really tell you as you approach that with respect. I think that's probably the key word. Respectful questions to be able to obtain the, and they will tell you, this is the way that I like to interact. This is what's important to me. And I found that directly from the source, asking the parents, how do you feel when you have all this group of people that have your child's best interest in mind? and that they really want to reach out to you. What are the forms that you feel comfortable with? And that was one of the things that I observed. Asking questions, there's nothing wrong with that.
Okay. And then I know, yeah, I mean, you made that point really well, I thought that, and it's the same in almost every culture. Not everybody has the same value system or understanding or ideas. But my next question is could you share some information or your insights towards the Latinx Hispanic community in relationship to early childhood services and development? Like, is there some things that we should be aware of in regards to that?
Okay. Yes, as I was reading that question, I made a few notes. I think that one of the areas is the love for their family. Latin American culture, Latinx, Hispanic, place the family in a high level of embracing. Decisions are making before decisions are making by another professional or another service provider is within home. It could be a spouse, it could be a brother, it could be a sister, it could be a grandpa, it could be a grandma, it could be even a very close friend. That's where the main source of decisions are made in our culture. Then you go to the professionals, then you go to the service providers. But a lot of them is what do you think? What are your thoughts? This is my situation. This is what they're proposing to do as far as providing services to my child. What are your thoughts? So they place a lot of value and interest in what family members think. And so that's one of those areas that affect whether they cooperate and help in this process, or sometimes takes a little bit of time for them to embrace and become actively involved in this because of family. That is one. The other one that I thought is the concept of allowing other person to provide a service that sometimes could be provided by the family member. And what I mean with this is that, once again, for the most part within Latin American communities, is the caring, the love from parents to children, that they want to do everything for them. And sometimes later on is evident on independence, for example. So some become a little bit more dependent on parents because of that love and caring approach that sometimes could trigger some challenges, allowing children to become a little bit more independent at early stages of development. I'm going to feed you, or I'm going to tie your shoe, and so that is a very predominant in Latin American culture, and it's not because consciously I want you to not be as independent, because I'm demonstrating my love. But on the other hand, if I don't allow you to do that, you're not going to learn how to tie your shoes at a younger age. So that is another aspect that I see. And the other one that I learned and that I saw is, for the most part, people are very appreciative of services. They might not be so eloquent in expressing it, but they are. And I noticed that they see the service provider as a person high above in the way that teachers, service providers, that's at the very top of how Latin Americans view people in our community. And I think that's very important. So those are the aspects that come to mind that I wanted to share with you.
Yeah, those are great. And thank you so much for taking the time to share those reflective thoughts with us. And I hope that I know certainly in my practice now, as I go and work with families of the Latinx Hispanic population, I'm going to take that time to work on those effective relationships and try to build better on those foundational skills. So I appreciate your insights on that. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us in the last few minutes we have?
Perhaps one more that I thought, and that is that in developing meaningful relationships with people before providing a service or having an assessment or any type of service that needs to take place, one of the cultural aspects is that people will always offer you a drink, will always offer you a meal, will always offer you something. And sometimes in some cultures, I mean, sometimes we say, "Oh no, thank you. No, I'm okay. I just had breakfast," or we just don't dare to do that because it's not considered sometimes professional, or that's not the reason why we're there, or that's not relevant. We're there to do the job. Well, I want you to rethink that a little bit within the Latino community. It would be an extremely polite practice to accept what they offer you. So if they offer you a drink, take it. If they offer you a little meal, and I say meal, I know it's like they might offer you a snack, but sometimes it will be a meal. If you're comfortable, my recommendation is experience the culture and embrace it. And that's what we call acculturation, correct? To be able to acculturate and to think, okay, if this is going to allow me to develop a meaningful relationship and rapport with the families, I'm going to have a little taste of whatever it is that they offer, because I assure you, many people perhaps that are listening to this, it probably resonates with some of their experiences to say, yes, this is important. And believe me, as you asked at the beginning of the conversation, any aspects that need to be taken into account, that certainly will be one of those.
Right. That just brought up a family that I at one time worked with. They had every time they had offered me something, and I, of course, have been raised that's impolite and that I'm in at my job and that's unprofessional. And so I would always say, no, I'm okay. And I'm also a picky eater. So sometimes the food, I was like, no, I'm okay. And then, after I've gone into their home a couple of times and they keep asking me, I just finally, because I'm like, they asked me at the beginning and the middle and at the end. And so finally I was like, okay, I can't say no one more time. So I did it. And boy, that just made such a huge difference in like our relationship almost changed, like you were saying your story at the beginning. But then I also had to divulge that I am a picky eater. And so it's not that I don't want your food. It's just your food is touching and I don't I don't want that. And they said, well, you're like my kid. And I thought, yeah, I probably am. So
yes, indeed.
So great examples. Well, thank you so much for taking your time and meeting with us. And I hope to be able to share some more information about this culture and help us as early child care providers learn how to engage more effectively with them.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for providing me with this opportunity.